Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Zilkoski. I am the current president of American Association for Geodetic Surveying, AAGS. And today, Chris Parrish is going to give us a presentation on the Geospatial Center for Arctic and Pacific, better known as GCAP. Dr. Chris Parrish is professor of geomatics at the School of Civil and Construction Engineering at Oregon State University. Chris is the founding director of the Geospatial Center for Arctic and Pacific, a university-led center for advancing research and education in geodesy, geomatics, and geospatial engineering. He owns a PhD in civil engineering with an emphasis in geospatial information engineering from the University of Wisconsin, a master's of science in civil and coastal engineering with an emphasis in geomatics from the University of Florida, and a bachelor of science in physics from Bates College. He is a past president of American Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, ASPRS. Prior to joining Oregon State University, Chris was a lead physical scientist in NOAA's National Geodetic Survey. I've known Chris for, I guess, probably going on 40 years now. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris now, and he's going to give us his presentation on the GCAP. Chris, you can take the screen.
All right, thanks, Dave. Thanks for the introduction. Let me go ahead and share my screen. So thanks again. Thanks for the opportunity to talk about our Geospatial Center for the Arctic and Pacific, GCAP, and the work that we're doing on our NGS Geospatial Modeling Grant. So first of all, just in terms of who we are, this is us, well, at least some of us. This is the faculty and graduate students here in our geomatics group at Oregon State University. This was taken at the beginning of this current academic year. It does not include our the students in our undergraduate minor. If it did, we would have needed a much wider angle camera lens. But it's a great group and a growing group, as I'll talk about. And then GCAP, the Geospatial Center for the Arctic and Pacific. So this is led by Oregon State University, funded primarily through an NGS Geospatial Modeling Grant that I'll get to in a minute. But we also have key members and partner organizations, and those include the University of Alaska at Anchorage, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, or CRITFC, and the Yurok Tribe. And collectively, our goal is to enhance and extend beneficial use of the National Spatial Reference System, NSRS, in the specific region of the country where we feel these advances are most needed, and that's the Pacific Northwest and Alaska. And then the other part of our mission is to develop future leaders in geodesy and geospatial professions through new education opportunities and new opportunities for workforce development. So as I mentioned, we're funded primarily through a National Geodetic Survey, NGS Geospatial Modeling Grants that we received in 2023. We were fortunate to be one of 4 recipients of geospatial modeling grants. Those are, in addition to ourselves, Scripps, Michigan State, and the Ohio State University. In terms of drivers for why NGS has this geospatial modeling grant program and put out these grants, I would say there are 2 key ones. One of them is the geodesy crisis, and I think that's something that's been discussed in other videos in this AAGS video series. But basically, we currently have an alarming shortage of geodesists in government agencies where there used to be many geodesists. In some cases, that number is now approaching 0. And unfortunately, we just aren't putting out enough new students with the right education and background to be able to fill this lack. And that's illustrated in a figure down below, that inverted triangle that's been used in a lot of presentations and talks. I believe the originator of that image was Dr. Dana Kekamis at NGS. But basically what it's showing is that if you look across the entire geospatial industry, everything in surveying and mapping hinges on geodesy. So this entire $1 trillion geospatial economy, it hinges on geodesy. And the way Dan has shown it here, geodesy is it's that crumbly sort of tippy point. And I did a slight modification to Dana's diagram. I would say that crumbly tippy point has its own crumbly tipping point, and that's basically the critical lack of geodesy education and new graduates. So these are, that's one of the big drivers. And then the other one is NGS, as you probably know, is in the process right now of rolling out the modernized NSRS. So that includes, for example, NatRef 2022, NapGD 2022. That's going on right at the same time as we've got this geodesy crisis. So all of that leads to a big demand for research and for new education programs, and those are things that we're trying to address. So within GCAP, we actually have 8 separate tasks that we're working on. Each of those is essentially its own project. These break down into 3 broad themes. So there's geodetic tools, models, workflows, geodetic infrastructure, partnerships, education, and outreach. And I'll quickly go through I'll go through each of these 8 tasks. Some of them not in great detail. Some of these have been covered in other videos in this series, so I'll try to point those out. And then others I'll spend a bit more time on. But starting with task 1, this is about real-time precise point positioning. This is led by Drs. Brian Weaver, G.A. Park, Chase Simpson, and Muge Albayrak. And the NGS subject matter expert for this is Josh Jones. So a key goal here is trying to develop new models for real-time precise point positioning. And as you can see in this diagram over on the right-hand side from Brian Weaver, it's the objective is to try to blend the advantages of precise point positioning, network RTK, and conventional RTK. And so this will provide accurate, real-time positioning, ideally for GPS or GNSS users, including in remote areas where they might not have existing geodetic infrastructure, like a lot of nearby core stations. One of the successes of this group so far has been the development of a new stochastic model that better models GNSS observation noise, particularly in challenging ionospheric conditions. And if you're interested in this topic, Brian Weaver has given another video that you can find online. And then task 2, this is one that's led primarily by our partners, the Columbia River Intertribal Fish Commission, CRITFC, and the Yurok Tribe. And it's all about leveraging the modernized NSRS, so leveraging NapGD 2022, GEOID 2022, for improved hydrodynamic modeling. And a lot of what these groups are trying to support is improved decision-making related to salmon and salmon outcomes and survival. And so for the hydrodynamic modeling that goes into this, obviously very precise measurements of riverbed height are needed. And you need to know very accurately about which way water is going to flow. And so we feel that the improved GEOID model, other improvements as part of NapGD 2022, are really going to be critical in improving these hydrodynamic models. So those are things that we're testing on the Columbia River and the Klamath River. And then also part of this task is Muge Albayrak's work on deflection of the vertical observations using digital zenith cameras. You can see a student in this photo. That's Dana Lind, who's a current master's student. And then if I jump to the next slide, this is Muge. So Muge is working with the QDaedalus astrogeodetic system for making deflection of the vertical observations, and that in turn is being used for validating NapGD 2022. And she's particularly focused on areas in the Willamette Valley and Oregon coast, where there's a sparsity of terrestrial gravity coverage and also varying geology. So if you're interested in that topic, I recommend watching Muge's video. Jumping to task 3. This is broadly titled New Datums and Geospatial Applications. And what this is all about is getting this very broad geospatial community. And when I say that, what I mean is people working in LiDAR, in photogrammetry, in GIS, in uncrewed aircraft systems, mobile mapping, sonar, all of these different surveying and mapping geospatial fields that all obviously have a need for very accurate coordinates. It's about getting them ready for the modernized NSRS. And across that broad range, what we see is that individual firms and agencies vary a lot in terms of where they are on that readiness scale. So some of the things that we're doing in this task, we work closely with ASPRS, and ASPRS has a NSRS Modernization Working Group. The chair of that is Dr. Qasim Abdullah from Wolpert. I'm a co-chair along with Qasim, and some of the things that we've done, we put out a paper that's shown here in the lower right. It's called Ready, Set, Modernize. So that was basically a paper with recommendations from our working group to the geospatial industry and also to software providers. I actually think I can, maybe jumping away from the slides for a second, I can pull that up. So this is the paper. You can find this online. It contains, first of all, just what's going on with NSRS modernization, what's happening, what are the changes, what are the benefits, and then specific recommendations for preparing for NSRS modernization within the geospatial industry. And we've got a separate set of recommendations for software developers. Jumping back to the slides. Whoops. Okay, so that's part of what we're doing in task 3. Other things that are going on in task 3. This one I think is really interesting. Let's see if I can lower this. Sorry. The Oregon Beach Bill. So in 1967, Oregon passed a landmark piece of legislation called the Beach Bill. You can see down in the lower right, that was Governor Tom McCall looking through the leveling instrument there. Next to him is Professor Bob Schultz, who taught here for 56 years. He sadly passed away earlier this month. His memorial service was this week. But Bob was instrumental in surveying the statutory vegetation line. And so basically what this was is the Beach Bill codified the public's right to access all Oregon beaches. But to do that, they needed to know, where is that line? Where's the proverbial line in the sand that defines where the public has access? And so that was defined through this thing that became known as the statutory vegetation line. And that actually got codified in state legislation in the form of a set of coordinates that are all referenced to NAD 27, also called NAD 27. So this is a big challenge. We've got coordinates that are in legislation, not even referenced to the current NSRS, let alone the modernized NSRS. So, what do we do? What do we do about that? How do we update these coordinates? And then another thing that we're doing, and this is primarily through our work with the ASPRS working group, is fielding questions from the geospatial industry. And we get a lot of these, and they're along these lines. Somebody can come to us and say, hey, I work for a mid-sized geospatial firm. We have contracts from federal agencies, from state agencies, requiring us to collect LiDAR data and imagery, to produce ortho photos, to produce point clouds. We operate on very narrow profit margins, and we've got a very complex workflow. And over here on the right is just an example of what that workflow might look like. And basically, it can involve software from a lot of different manufacturers. Software for airborne data collection with a particular camera or LiDAR from, in this case, Company A subscription PPP service from Company B, trajectory processing using Company C's software, processing orthophotos and point clouds using software from Company D, on and on. And if anything breaks in this workflow, that can be potentially disastrous for these companies. So with the modernized NSRS, they need to know that all these different inputs and outputs of all these different software packages are talking to each other, and basically that they're all ready to support the modernized NSRS. So we're providing recommendations to companies on how to go about working with their software vendors on that. I also wanted to point out on task 3 a couple student research projects that we've had lately that I think have been really interesting, really informative. So a master's student, Susanna Eng, just graduated this past fall. She developed a software called Chronoshifter. So this is a software tool that basically transforms point cloud data from NAD 83 2011 and NAVD 88 to NatRef 2022 and NapGD 2022. Among other things, this can be used to answer questions like, there are a lot of state and federal agencies that might have very large LiDAR holdings. These could be, at a minimum, hundreds of terabytes, potentially a lot more than that. And there's questions about, okay, how long is it going to take if all we want to do is just transform all of those coordinates? And then another study that I found really interesting, Sanjay Patel, who just graduated earlier this year, he did a research project looking at 3 different methods that people can potentially use to migrate legacy data sets to the modernized NSRS. And those are recollect, reprocess, and transform. And Sanjay looks at that both quantitatively, in other words, in terms of the spatial accuracies, and also qualitatively. And I actually found that the qualitative analysis, in other words, what were the user's experiences with those 3 different methods? What were the kind of hidden gotchas that came out in those? I found that to be really interesting, and I think putting those results out is going to be really beneficial for people in deciding what to do with their existing data. And then task 4, this one is all about developing and evaluating OPUS utilities. So this one is very much about working with our partners in NGS. Dr. Dan Gillens is the NGS subject matter expert on this one. Among other things, some of the work that we've done in this task includes comparisons of pages, which is NGS's GNSS baseline utility, processing utility, with the multi-GNSS version, MPages. So MPages allows use not just of GPS signals, but also signals from satellites from other constellations, GLONASS, Galileo, etc. And hopefully some of the work from this will be up to NGS, of course, but we hope that some of this work will assist in updating future NGS software. Task 5. This is another one where we've had a separate AAGS video on this, but this is one that's proving to be extremely beneficial in terms of putting out tools that people can use operationally. And so what's happening in Task 5, and this one's led by Chase Simpson and Brian Weaver, it's to develop tools for real-time network, RTN managers, to align their networks with the National Spatial Reference System. We've got a fantastic PhD student, William O'Heen, who's working on this. And you can see they've got a graphical user interface for this. This actually started with work that we were doing with the Oregon Department of Transportation, ODOT, and NGS, even going back a year or so before our geospatial modeling grant. So we started with ODOT's real-time network, which is called ORGN. And Chase and Brian and William and company were working on developing this tool that basically allows ODOT to align the Oregon real-time network with the National Spatial Reference System. And NGS likes this work, and so what we're working on right now is actually making this a national service. And our goal is to have an online utility for this. This is something that's being worked on right now. I sort of hesitate to give an exact date, but we're tentatively aiming for by the end of this calendar year to have that available as an online utility. Task 6 is multi-GNSS. So again, this is, for example, working with MPages, looking at new methods of using signals from all available satellites. One of the successes in this task so far has been the development of cycle slip detection and repair software, a software tool called OR CIDR that is developed by Dr. Jihye Park and her students. And then education and outreach. I'm going to spend some time here because this is really critical to GCAP's mission. So the overarching objective, develop the next generation of geodesists, surveyors, and geospatial professionals, and then provide upskilling opportunities for those already working in these fields. To date, some of the things we've done, we've given over 30 presentations. That number is actually old. By this point, it's well over 30 presentations at various professional meetings and elsewhere. We hosted a surveying and geomatics conference that included multiple NSRS and geospatial modeling grant sessions. We have a workshop series. So we've taught workshops on VDatum, on GNSS and Geodesy, and the photo that you see here at the bottom of the slide. That was actually the first workshop that we did in 2024 on Geodesy and GNSS. And you can see just how well attended that was. A lot of media coverage. I'll talk more about that in a minute. The workshop series, maybe I can just do this now. Let me see if I can go ahead and bring up our website, and I'll show you where you can go to get information about our workshops. If you go, this is just our main GCAP website. If you go to education and then workshop schedule, you can see, for example, that we've got a workshop coming up on September 2nd through 3rd. That's going to be, again, the GNSS and Geodesy workshop, and then another one on Introduction to Reality Capture. So more on our educational program, starting with our grad program. So our grad program in geomatics has been around for a while. You can see the current numbers of enrolled students. Since 2011, we've graduated 51 master's students, 3 masters of engineering, 23 PhD, and we've had 6 postdocs. What is much newer is our minor in geomatics engineering. So this is primarily a minor for students that are civil engineering or construction engineering management majors, but not necessarily. We've started welcoming in students from other majors into our geomatics minor. And you can see some of the required classes and elective classes here in our minor. This has been hugely successful so far. We just started this in 2023, and immediately that year we had 5 students who graduated in the geomatics minor. And then currently, or this isn't current, this is January 2025, we had 55 students enrolled. I just got updated numbers last week, and I believe we now have over 60 students who are enrolled in our geomatics minor. And then the other thing that's new is we're in the process of proposing a new undergraduate degree that's in geodesy, geomatics, and geospatial engineering. So we're actually calling this 3GE. And what's really unique about this, there are existing programs, of course, that teach geomatics. There are many places where geospatial science or geospatial engineering are taught, but really linking that with geodesy, which, as I mentioned earlier, is the underpinning of all of this, and giving students exposure across the entire range here. That's something that we feel is going to be unique about this new proposed program. And this seems to have the support of the dean and the university. So it's a lengthy process of going through proposing a new degree, but we're in the middle of this now. Here's a look at the goal of the program. So basically expand that success of our geomatics minor to also offer a major that will help alleviate the shortfall of geodesists and geospatial professionals in the US. And then you can see topics that are covered in both the core curriculum and in elective courses. And if I actually jump to looking at the course list for this, the thing that I wanted to highlight for this talk is the focus on geodesy. So there actually aren't a lot of programs that teach geodesy at the undergraduate level. It's kind of a difficult thing to do. We took a look at this, and there are some geomatics programs that unfortunately don't have a full dedicated class in geodesy. Some have just one. So something that's going to set us apart here is 3 separate classes focused on geodesy: geometric geodesy, physical geodesy, satellite geodesy. And of course, it's not just us. I mentioned earlier our other partners in GCAP, one of them being the University of Alaska at Anchorage, UAA. They have an ABET accredited geomatics program that they've been working really hard on expanding and getting more students throughout the state of Alaska who are going to be coming out of this program with these critically important skills. And then finally, it's not just about the formal education opportunities and the workshops. A lot of this is about taking the tools, taking the lessons that we learned and putting them out there so that they can benefit the existing workforce. So things like that RTN alignment tool that I talked about that we're going to try to turn into an online web utility, the course dashboard, GNSS processing tools. And this isn't just us, it's the other recipients of the geospatial modeling grants that are all working together on being able to make results of our research available to current professionals. It's things like this current AAGS Geodesy YouTube series, things like our ASPRS NSRS modernization case studies, best practices, recommendations on migrating legacy data to the modernized NSRS. If you want more information, I briefly showed earlier our website, but the other thing that I'll just kind of quickly show is we've got a, if I can find it, we've got a outreach page where we have things like press releases that we've done. There was a local TV interview. So that's all available through the GCAP in the news portion of our website. And so that's it. If you want more information, I'm just ending here with a great photo of Professor Chase Simpson and some of our current students. If you'd like more information, I've got my contact info up there, and then also that of Jenna Borber, who's our GCAP projects manager. So thank you.
Great presentation, Chris.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. I have several questions that I want to ask just for that I know other listeners would be interested in. But my first one is just how did you get started? I mean, I think there'd be maybe a lot of other universities and groups that would like to be able to do something like you, because this is a great collaborative approach to solving, individual university needs by working together. I really like it. So was it something difficult to get started, or did the university, get help from them? How did it go?
I would say it was kind of a grassroots effort in the sense that, we've had geomatics here within our civil engineering curriculum for a long time. I mentioned Professor Bob Schultz, who unfortunately passed away recently. Mike Olson, my colleague, Dr. Mike Olson, was another kind of early member of our group. And basically what we found is that at the same time as some of the other civil engineering programs in the U.S. were sort of moving geomatics elsewhere, our civil group really embraced it. And fortunately, we did quite well in terms of our students have come in. I showed kind of the growth in our new geomatics minor. Our students graduating all have multiple job offers. So that's been a big factor in attracting new students. And then just sort of seeing this trajectory, seeing the research opportunities that are available right now across geomatics, geodesy, geospatial engineering, and the demand for students, all of this has kind of catalyzed our group and the university as a whole to look at doing the potential new major. You mentioned other universities. We'd be more than happy at any point to work with others on this. This isn't just about us. We really want to work collaboratively on addressing the geodesy crisis, on new education and outreach opportunities. So not just the other universities that are geospatial modeling grant recipients, but if anyone else is interested in working with us, sharing ideas, we would be more than happy to pursue that kind of collaboration.
That's great to hear. And so anybody listening to this YouTube, there's two messages that just came out. One is you take these courses, you can get a job. Okay. The people are hiring you from these graduates. That is great to understand. And maybe I'd like to follow up a little bit more myself with trying to get the word out about that. And the other thing is universities having more people engaged in this is going to help spread the geodesy. And that's something, as many people know, I've been very, very active in trying to push. But thank you. Another kind of question I looked at, you're up in the Oregon area, so the Northwest in Alaska. So why that region in support? Is it just because you're there, but is there a bigger need there? And I really like that you have fisheries involved with the tribe trying to think. So, I mean, that's a real world practical application that's engaged.
Absolutely. And great question. Thanks for that question. Here in the Pacific Northwest and also our partners up in Alaska, I would say we're in a region of tremendous physical beauty. It's a great place to live and work, all kinds of outdoor activities that are available to us. It's also a place of a lot of tectonic motion. And so all along our GCAP region, we're located along the Pacific Ring of Fire. Here in Oregon, we're actually located within the Cascadia subduction zone, where the Juan de Fuca plate is subducting beneath the North American plate. So we actually have relatively little seismic activity compared to where I grew up in California, but occasionally very devastating earthquakes that happen here. The Cascadia subduction zone megathrust earthquakes that scientists tell us happen about every 300 years. The last one was in 1700. So all of this kind of contributes to the need, but at the same time, I would say we've got, and particularly looking at up in Alaska, we've got pretty limited geodetic infrastructure compared to other regions of the country. So if you look at, for example, the number of core stations, right in some of these areas where we have large tectonic motion, we've also got limited geodetic infrastructure. So it's kind of this double whammy that we want to solve, and both through the education, through the research, and then hopefully over time improving geodetic infrastructure here in our region. We hope to address those things.
So it seems like a lot of work, but what are your biggest challenges for industry workflows? Like you mentioned the NICE diagram, which I really like. It shows that for the modernization, you have a lot of different components, a lot of different companies, a lot of different people engaged in trying to get a data set to the final product. So what are your biggest challenges that you see with that?
So some of the biggest challenges for industry, first of all, just recognizing that NSRS modernization is happening, being prepared, also knowing the benefits. I mean, the great thing about this is the improvements in coordinate interoperability, accuracy, precision. There could be a little bit of pain in the beginning and having to implement the new reference frames and new geopotential data, but ultimately these are going to benefit a lot of people. So, getting people ready, having industry partners, talking with their software vendors again, taking steps now, things like making sure that their current metadata are complete and accurate. Holding on to things for some of these are just, I would say, best practices anyway, but for existing projects, if the control stations were established using GNSS, holding on to those raw observation files, holding on to all the original field notes, making sure that things are currently referenced to the current NSRS. And by the way, a quick anecdote. This was something that I briefly mentioned, Sanjay Padel's research, where he looked at actually 3 different methods of taking existing coordinates and migrating them to the modernized NSRS. So that was the recollect. That one could be great, but obviously very time-consuming and expensive. Reprocess. And that reprocess is basically taking your existing data, if you've got existing GNSS observation files, reprocessing them in the modernized NSRS, and then redoing your adjustment or your processing of your geospatial data based on that control. And then step 3 is simply to transform. So one of the things that I thought was really interesting that came out of that work was on the option of reprocessing. In theory, reprocessing sounds like it's a pretty easy option, maybe, if you've got those original GNSS observation files. But what Sanjay found, and I think this is really going to carry over to others too, is there are some hidden gotchas there. At a minimum, there's some additional information you need to have. What was the antenna type used to collect that data? What was the antenna height? But there's even more to it. And those of us who came up doing field surveys remember writing down everything in our field books, the yellow write in the rain book, where you would meticulously record all your notes. And how about a situation where something happened to the tripod tip on the way out to survey that mark, and so there was a 5 millimeter offset that needed to be applied that was written in those hand notes. If that information wasn't all captured, that option of reprocessing, that in theory sounds great, it might not it might not lead to actually the same accuracies that you might get through the transform. So little recommendations, like if you're going to reprocess, then also maybe transform your coordinates and make sure that those two methods give you coordinates that are in general agreement.
Yeah, I think I look forward to seeing that report, and I think we're going to try to do an AAGS YouTube on that, because I think that's going to be a big issue with a lot of people, how to transform. And I think also Suzanne I guess her name is, she did a study where you're looking at point cloud transform plane, and that's another one that we're going to try to do a YouTube on, because I believe that those processes are going to be very, very important to the geospatial community. So we're going to follow up on those, and I'm glad to see that you guys are doing that. And I guess that was one of my questions, was what kind of recommended resources, and you just kind of went through it. And I believe the metadata is critical, and having the right information to start with, you can probably do it. If you do not have that information, then you have no idea. So that's very important, which, once again, if you talk to anybody in the geospatial world, that they talk about metadata, make sure it's correct. So anyways, that's good. Switching a little bit to the teaching of geodesy, which once again, I'm so glad that your university and other ones that are getting into trying to promote geodesy in the bachelor science level for sure. And you're right, it can be a little difficult because it is math intensive. So you have to have the people that are very interested in that. So what are your greatest challenges for getting in the undergraduate program? Is it the people are afraid of the math involved in it, or just lack their knowledge of it?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, before I get to that one, I wanted to just go back a minute to something you touched on. So you mentioned our two of our recent graduates, Susanna Ang and Sanjay Patel. Absolutely agree. They both did great work. I really want to make sure that we can get that available. I think both have journal papers that we're working on, and ideally, Susanna's software, that Chronoshifter tool that she developed, is something that we'll be able to share. The other quick update: so Susanna is now working for Caltrans, California Department of Transportation. So good opportunity to help take some of this and hopefully help Caltrans and other state agencies with NSRS modernization. And Sanjay, I believe I can announce this. I think he just accepted a contract position with NOAA's Office of Coast Survey. So it's good to see our former students going off into both state and federal government agencies. The question on teaching geodesy at the undergraduate level, that's an important one, and it is tricky. And one of the challenges is, if we think about conventional geodesy classes, which are often taught at the graduate level, and what the prerequisites for those are. So students coming in as a starting point often need to have calculus, differential equations, linear algebra, statistics, some physics, and that's viewed as really just the jumping off point for getting into geodesy. So then, if you translate that over to the undergraduate level, what that means is that depending on what kind of a program students are in, perhaps they'll never get there, or even within an engineering program in a college of engineering like we are here, students are going to get to the point where they've got that background, but that might mean they're not taking that first geodesy class until the third year. And so really one of the things that we want to emphasize is trying to introduce concepts early on. So even if they're not doing a super rigorous geodesy class until a little bit later in their program, at least introducing some of those concepts in the first couple of years, and kind of getting them excited, getting them familiar with things, so that when they get to the more hardcore geodesy classes a little bit later, things like geoids and geoid models and reference frames are not, these concepts aren't totally new to them.
Yeah, I know firsthand about the math. To be honest with you, I graduated in, my background was photogrammetry and geodesy, and so I had the math background. But when I went back to the Ohio State University, okay, that OSU, when I went back there, my math was a little bit weak, because you never really applied it. But saying that, I could program. So I had a friend there that I met that couldn't program, but he was great in math. And so we partnered together and he retaught me my math that I needed to know. And I helped him with his program. So my point about bringing that whole thing is not to say how bad I was in math, was that partnering up. And so I think when you're doing some of this with the math and the students, finding people that just really, the math really comes to them and the other one, but trying to do some kind of webinars or seminars or something in there in the beginning when people are things, so they don't get so afraid of it and that they can accomplish it. But anyways, that's just something that I know has always been an issue with geodesy.
I agree, and I think I don't want to give the impression that we have all the answers on this. We're kind of working through this, but this is again an area where we'd really welcome conversation, discussion with others. And you're absolutely right. We don't want to scare students off. We want to recognize that there are all kinds of skill sets that are valuable in this profession, and hopefully be able to take students with a variety of strengths and interests and bring them all in and help them on to successful careers.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Another question is, how can industry partners contribute to the training for the next generation? I mean, I've always believed that the industry, the mining industry, the automobile industry, Google, all of these industries, FedEx, they need people with geodesy, but they don't really understand it or don't appreciate it. So are there things you're doing to bring them in, or is that still an obstacle?
I think I wouldn't describe it as an obstacle as much as an area of opportunity. But you're absolutely right. And different, the firms that their core focus is surveying and mapping, by and large, they're, at least aware of geodesy and its importance. But as you mentioned, there are so many tangential fields that all rely very, very heavily on spatial coordinates, accurate spatial coordinates, consistent spatial coordinates, and may or may not realize it, may or may not be aware of some of the underlying challenges that can occur. And occasionally you do hear some pretty alarming things. I mean, you can hear statements of people saying, for example, well, we don't need, our coordinates are all naturally accurate, naturally consistent because we're all using GPS. So because we're all using the same system, everything is going to be consistent and going to be accurate. And so imagine, this is purely hypothetical, but think about statements like that coming, for example, from somebody working on autonomous vehicles, and potential consequences of that kind of lack of knowledge. So I think that things that industry partners can do, one is just sharing information with each other, those that are kind of directly in this field and get it, making sure that they're not just about selling tools and products to their customers, but also helping educate them. I think there's a lot of opportunity for industry to, if they would like to get involved with us and maybe teaching some of these workshops and doing some of this outreach. It often, speaking from having taught classes here, the majority of our students are looking for industry positions at the end of their program, particularly at the undergraduate level. And so having somebody come in from industry that is a professional in the field that they're helping to go into and talking about challenges, talking about lessons learned, that can be hugely influential for our students. So that's another type of collaboration that we would really very much welcome.
Yeah, I like that idea, and maybe there's something we could just try to get some industry groups that we're going to do just that. I agree. Trying to get people like that does two things. One is it tells the students, oh, wow, this is something that they're doing. And the other end, it also gets that industry starting to see, well, what are they missing and how can you help? So I like that. Talking about students, how do you recruit new students? You seem like I see that bringing in and trying to bridge the geomatics together. I think that's a good idea where you can start getting people in. And I always like that idea because eventually you'll get someone that's going to be, hey, you know, I'm really interested in this geodesy and I want to go a little bit further with it now. So I think trying to get people to the very basic concepts is a great idea. But how do you attract them? Because it seems like you've got quite a few.
So on the graduate side, I think so far it's been mainly word of mouth, and we've been fortunate that some of our graduates of our graduate program have gone on to be very successful, influential leaders, and so I think those people talking to others has encouraged applications into our graduate program. For the geomatics minor, those are largely students that are, again, currently in our civil engineering major or construction engineering management major or a closely related major. And so those are students that we typically get into our undergraduate geomatics classes. And we have just fantastic instructors, people teaching our classes who are super enthusiastic, who get the students involved in a lot of lab exercises, things where they're outside working with total stations, GNSS. I think that really resonates with a lot of the students, and so we've done a good job of attracting them that way. The part that's going to be a bit more difficult is in launching this new major, because a lot of times, students are trying to identify their major before they even get to college. And so what that means is I think it's going to involve more education and outreach at the K through 12 level, letting people know that this program is available. This is an area where I also really like the idea of collaboration. I mean, obviously being Oregon State, we want to recruit people into our own program, but there are few enough programs working in this area that I think, collaborating with our other geospatial modeling grant partners and others, and, potentially maybe there's a student that's a great fit for a program at your alma mater, the Ohio State University or, Michigan State. But, just letting prospective students know what these different educational opportunities are.
Okay, that's good. Something dealing with money. How do you support this? I know you do the NGS geospatial grants, but where are you getting your funds to keep this thing going? You're doing great work, so I'm hoping that it continues on and you can have it. But that's one of the, I think, an issue that a lot of other universities would say, well, how do we support this activity and so forth?
Yeah. So on the research side, through our geospatial modeling grants, and NGS has been a big supporter of that. But we've got other funding agencies as well. I mentioned we've done a lot of work with Oregon Department of Transportation, some work with Oregon State Parks that manages that statutory vegetation line that I talked about. NASA has supported some of our work in geospatial projects. And then in terms of the educational programs, we're very fortunate to have some good support from industry. So just last week, we had representatives from Leica Geosystems who are out here. Leica supplies surveying equipment and software that's used by all of the students. So if you ever come out here and get a tour of our lab, we can go down to the lockers downstairs and see all of the new total stations, GNSS, one multi-station, leveling gear, the corresponding software that students all get to use. So industry support and support from federal and state agencies. And so far, it looks like we've got good support internally from the college and university as well.
Well, that's good. I'm just glad to see that this is happening, and I do appreciate everything your university does to promote geospatial, especially geodesy. As everybody knows, I'm still interested in trying it because of the geodesy crisis that we believe is still going on. So this has been a great session. I don't really have any other questions, but I leave it to, is there something else that we haven't talked about that you want to say, that you, just anything before we close out?
Again, just that I think the collaboration aspect of this, to me, it's both fun and really the only way that we can address some of the big challenges like the geodesy crisis is working together on this. So all the things that I mentioned that we're doing, we're fortunate to do it within the collaboration. Our, GCAP I mentioned is not just us, but University of Alaska Anchorage, CRITFC, Yurok Tribe. We've got the other geospatial modeling grant partners, NGS, obviously, other agencies. But we would very much like to partner with others. So if there are others out there watching this video who these ideas resonate with, whether you're in industry, another university, if you've got ideas to share, want information about how we're doing things, please don't hesitate to reach out.
So you heard it, folks. Please take a look at this and reach out to Chris. And he's provided some references that are there. And I know Chris, and he'd be more than happy to talk with you and collaborate. I appreciate your time, Chris. I know you're busy. So thank you for giving your time to do this YouTube. Thanks for everything. We'll talk later. Bye-bye.